Foundations. The NHE Plus enables us to price raft and trench foundations. We can also allow for piling with a ring beam or piling with a raft foundation on top. We're able to create a quote using all of the foundation options or any combination of them. For the purposes of showing all the available options and providing a clear understanding of the way each one works, we're going to look at each one individually. We'll begin with the raft foundation, followed by the piled foundations, and finally the trench. The quotation that we're doing actually requires a trench foundation only, so we'll enter this in last, and when we leave the foundation section, it will be the trench foundation details that will be left in. This is what the later sections of the quote will be based on. Raft foundation. Click here to open the raft foundation section. There are red boxes to fill in. We can enter the required information into the red boxes, or if we prefer, use the thumbnail picture like this. It's great for clarifying exactly what we need to enter. I'll put 0.15 linear metres for the thickness of the floor slab. The toe has a default setting of 100mm by 150mm. It's yellow boxes, so we can adjust the size of the toe if we want. Like this. We'll change the height to 225mm. Depth of excavation into the ground will be 0.45 linear metres. The width of the slab is 0.452. Enter the details. It's automatically put into the correct red boxes on the pricing sheet. The foundation external corners need to be entered. The red question mark opens a pictorial reference. We can also enter the number of external corners in here. It's 8. Repeat the process with the internal corners. Again, we can click on the red question mark for clarification. This is 6. Surface area of slab and total slab perimeter can be entered in this thumbnail here. See, the red arrows indicate which boxes this thumbnail is for. The area is 121.04 metres square, and the perimeter is 56 linear metres. The internal foundations are 21.5 linear metres. The concrete's worked out, and we can see the quantity required before wastage is added here. This calculation is based on the concrete having a rectangle edge. The volume of subbase is also calculated. Again, this figure is based on the concrete having a rectangle edge. This is for the internal subbase. We do have the option to switch to beveled edges. Just click here. Let's click beveled. When the details are entered, this is automatically allowed for. As we can see, we now need more concrete and a lot less subbase. The text here also changes to make it clear what method the calculations are based on. Let's switch this back. All the measurements for the raft foundation are in. Let's look at what's being calculated. The setting out will require our judgment. We'll enter 1 day and put in 16 hours to allow for the 2 men who will be carrying out this task. Stakes and profiles are calculated. The details can be viewed by clicking on the question marks. We can also adjust the materials selected by using the drop-down menu. There won't be any manual excavation, so we'll leave that blue box empty, but we will want a digger for 2 days, so just enter 2 in here. The hours are automatically worked out, but these can be changed. Shoring options are available if required. Just click the box to switch them on. A dumper will also be needed for 2 days. The hours are brought through automatically, but we can change these. We can view how the expansion, bulk up rate has been worked out, so we can see the amount of actual soil there is. This is the default percentage allowed for expansion. This figure is then converted into yards, and it's this figure that's used to work out, for example, how many skips will be required. We can adjust the method of waste disposal by using the thumbnail. The hours allowed to dispose of the soils will be dependent on the method that's chosen. We can view the time allocated to each method by clicking this red question mark. We can adjust these times if we want. Raft shuttering is worked out here. Click the red question mark, see how it's being worked out. This is the actual shuttering board. We can adjust the material that's selected. Here's the bracing. We can adjust the quantity. We'll change this to 3. We can change the material too. The toe is here. Again, we can change the number of rows allowed. Let's put in 3, and I'll change the material to 100 by 75, making up my 225mm toe. Enter the details, and it's automatically put onto the pricing sheet. So that's the shuttering to the perimeter. We then have the stakes. Again, click the red question mark to see how it's calculated. So stake 1, the centres are here. This can be adjusted. The depth that the stake will go into the ground is here. The height of the stake required is shown. The programme then recommends the length of stake that we will need. Let's select this. The smaller stakes, stake 2, are here. We don't really need them to be so big, so we'll adjust that to 450mm. Lastly are the braces. The programme will automatically calculate these. It's based on a 45-degree angle, and the required length of the brace, based on this angle, is here. Next we have the fixings. Again, we can look into the exact detail. We can see how many fixings are allowed per strut, as well as the centres, both of which can be changed. Raft reinforcement follows. The reinforcement cages are first. The programme's worked out the quantity of bars. As the material we've selected is based on a linear metre cost, the quantity is shown in linear metres. If we adjust this to a material from our library that's purchased in lengths, the NHE Plus will base the quantity required on this length. We have complete control over the way the cages are calculated. Click on the red question mark. The programme has worked out that the length of each cage is this. Currently, all the costs are based on this. We can adjust this by clicking on the red question mark. This diagram shows how it's been worked out. The programme is looking at the actual size of the thickened slab, and it's allowing 50mm cover of concrete. So if we change the tail of the cage to 1.5, we see that the total length of cage adjusts to allow for this. If we put 75mm cover of concrete, that will reduce the length required. I'll just change the tail to 1.2. The centres for the cages are here. They're set to be every 600mm. We can adjust this. There are options to change the number of rebars going through connecting all of the cages too. This is the overlap allowance. If we just look at the length of cage option again, at the moment with our material selection we can get 2 cages out of each steel. If we alter the cage size like this, so we can now only get 1 cage out of each steel, the programme allows for this in the quantity of materials required. We'll just go back to the picture and take a look at the runner steels going through the cages. The length of overlap for each bar is here. It can be adjusted, and there are further details behind the info icon. So again, this will look at the steel we've chosen, and it will allow an overlap of 0.6. So based on these settings, we can see the quantity of steel allowed for the main ring beam reinforcement bars. The reinforcement ties is quite a complex calculation, automatically performed by the programme, but we can view the exact details by clicking the red question mark. The number of ties being used on each section can be viewed and altered if required. So we've got 4 ties to each cage, another 4 along the top to tie it to the top mesh, and 3 for each chair. All of these can be adjusted, and we can view the quantity of ties here. 2 layers of mesh are allowed for. Here's the quantity. We don't have to have 2 layers, we can remove the second layer if we want. If we click the Yes button, it will become a No, and then the item is removed from the costs. This applies to any item that has a Yes or No button next to it. The spacer details are here. We can see the spacing, it's 0.6. Every cage will also have 2 spacers at the bottom. Again, we can see how they're being calculated and alter this. We have 2 options for spacer chairs. We can calculate them individually. Alternatively, if we switch the individual option off and turn on the lengths option, the programme will automatically work this out. We can see how it's working it out and adjust the spacing in the picture if needed. Finally, on the Raft Foundation, we have the fill of foundations. We can change the concrete to a manual mix. Just click the picture. To switch it back to ready mix, just click the picture again. Levelling stakes aren't needed because the shuttering will be the level. Clayboard and slip membrane aren't required. The sub-base fill for our raft is here. We have the option for a compactor. We will have one for a day to compact this all down and will allow 5 hours. Raft polythene. We can see the number of rolls required. Another complex calculation. The programme looks at the shape of the foundation, including the overlap, to work this out. The overlap can be adjusted. Also, due to the awkward nature of Raft Foundation, often having odd shapes and different slabs, there's an allowance for what we have called the crinkle factor. This can be changed. This is added on independently of wastage. The wastage is added on top of this. Jointing tape will require our judgment. We'll put in a couple of rows. If timber frame is being used and this option has been selected, anchor bolts will be included based on the criteria shown in the picture. So with this setting, an anchor bolt would be placed every 1.2 metres on the perimeter walls. The Raft Foundation is priced. The totals for it are here. So we just completed the red boxes, checked the details and completed the relevant blue estimator's judgment boxes. We'll now remove the Raft Foundation details we've just entered and take a look at the piled foundations. Piled foundations. If piled foundations need to be allowed for, check this box. Due to the nature of piling, the works are generally carried out by a specialist contractor who will provide a quote for doing the job. Where possible, we want to break these costs down into materials, plant and labour. Doing this means that when we are generating the reports, the costs are dealt with correctly. We also need to enter an allowance for the hours. This will enable the programme to account for the piling in the work schedule. Let's click the blue question mark. Here we're provided with explanations about how to allow for piled foundations with a ring beam and piled foundations with a raft. If a ring beam is needed, we can use the trench foundations section. This will remove the soil, work out the concrete and so on. If we do this, we must remember to enter the shuttering to the beam if it's required, as well as the reinforcement. We may also need to add in a few additional lines, if for example a trench reinforcement item we require isn't covered by the standard defaults provided. If there is a raft foundation on top of the piles, we use the raft foundation section. This will enable us to calculate all the concrete shuttering, reinforcement and so on that will be needed. We'll now remove the piled foundation details that we've just entered and take a look at the trench foundations. Trench foundations. We can create a quote using all of the foundation options or any combination of them, but for the purposes of clearly showing how the trench foundation section calculates, and because the actual quote we're doing only has trench foundations, the raft and piling entered previously have been removed. To price our trench foundations, enter the required measurements into the red boxes or thumbnail pictures located here at the top. Enter any internal, external corners and the quantity of any internal foundation runs for the entire trench foundation. Now enter the main foundation run. If assistance is needed, click the red question mark. The picture clearly shows how to get this measurement. Enter the excavation depth, foundation width and depth from ground level to top of foundation for the main foundation run that we've entered above. Again, the thumbnail picture can provide further clarification if needed. The depth that the concrete will be and the amount required prior to wastage being added is automatically calculated. Additional trench foundations can be added by clicking this button here. We may want to use this function if a section or sections of the foundation are deeper or if the internal foundations are a different width or depth. Remember, if we enter additional foundations in here, the length of them shouldn't be included in the main foundation run box within the first trench foundation section on the main pricing sheet. Once the red boxes are complete and any additional foundations have been added, all of the items and tasks for the trench foundation will have been worked out. They're laid out in the order that the work will take place. There are a few blue boxes indicating the estimator's judgment is required. For these, we just use our knowledge of the site, the job and our workforce. The setting out is a blue box. The item is an auto level. Enter the number of days required for setting out. The hours allowed are a pre-filled yellow box. If this is adjusted, for example, to 16, this will now calculate the cost based on 2 workers doing this task for 1 day. Stakes for the profiles are calculated. Wastage is allowed. The items for the profiles are here. By clicking on the red question marks, we can view how these have been worked out. Any of the yellow pre-filled boxes within the picture can be adjusted, if the needs of the job being priced are different. The method and length of time needed to excavate the foundations will need our judgment. If the site or job require it, any manual excavation can be entered into this blue box. Any mechanical excavation is allowed for in this blue box. The hours are pre-filled, but the box is yellow, so we may want to adjust this. We can alter the plant item by using the drop-down menu. Delivery, collection and running costs are all factored in, alongside the hire per day charge. If shoring is needed, tick this box and fill in the blue boxes with the costs of the plant and materials, then enter the number of hours needed to do the task. Do we need a dumper? Enter the number of days into the blue box. Check the hours. Again, delivery, collection and running costs are included with the hire charge. By default, the soils are marked as being disposed of off-site. If this isn't the case, uncheck the box and the waste disposal options are removed. We'll just retick this. Instantly, the options are brought back. We can view how the expansion bulk-up rate has been worked out, so we can see the amount of actual soil there is. This is the default percentage allowed for expansion. This figure is then converted into yards, and it's this figure that's used to work out, for example, how many skips will be required. We can adjust the method of waste disposal by using the thumbnail. The hours allowed to dispose of the soils will be dependent on the method that's chosen. We can view the time allocated to each method by clicking this red question mark. We can adjust these times if required. Options for trench reinforcement are here. If it's not needed, uncheck the box. The costs are removed. We'll just retick this. The costs are back. The mesh reinforcement is here. The material can be adjusted by using the yellow drop-down. We can view exactly how this has been worked out by clicking on the picture. There is a lot of detail. We can change the numbers in each of the boxes, so the overlap, the distance from the edge, the width and length of each sheet. The blue text explains exactly how the programme's calculating, and more information can be found by clicking this information icon. Top and bottom reinforcement is here. Again, we can click the red question marks and fine-tune the details. If any additional reinforcement is needed, select the material and enter the amount required in this box. The spaces are also fully adjustable. The concrete for the foundations, by default, is ready mix. We can easily switch this to manual mix by clicking this button. The cost of the concrete are automatically worked out, along with any part load charges. Levelling stakes are here. If they aren't needed, click the yes, becomes a no, the costs are removed. The way the programme deals with clapboard is really clever. By default, it's set to allow for clapboard if the depth of any of the foundations, including additional, is greater than 1.5 linear metres. But this setting can be changed. We don't have any foundations with a depth greater than 1.5 linear metres, so no clapboard is allowed. But to show you how this works, let's alter the number to 0.9 linear metres. The clapboard's immediately worked out. We'll just change this back. We can click on the info icon here to learn more about this function. Slip membrane and anchor bolts can be included or removed. Just set the yes, no buttons to the required option. Whilst all of the standard and most of the less common items or tasks for a foundation are listed, if we need to allow for something extra within our foundation cost, we can click the Add Extra Row button. The totals for the foundation section are here. We can also click the View Summary of Foundation button. This will take us to the summary where we can view a snapshot of the costs and hours.